All right, welcome to the heat check. So the heat check, essentially, we take 5 names of different stocks that are hot right now in the market for one reason or another, whether they have a catalyst, something interesting happening, they had a stock offering, they're a meme stock, whatever it may be. We look at the chart from a technical basis. We also look at the news that's going around it right now, and we deem if any of it has any substance. So today I've got 5 names for you. Those 5 names are Oklo, TEM, BA, RDDT, and GME. So we got a smorgasbord of different industries here, which is kind of nice to see on the heat check. So we're going to start with Oklo, and unless you've been living under a rock on social media, this is a very, very hot stock. So Oklo, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a nuclear company. This is a hot sector right now in general. All of these companies are getting a lot of attention, mainly because a lot of money flow could be flowing into these companies. Now, with that being said, how do I feel about Oklo and what is the future? Well, as I like to say in general, I don't really like longing names at all-time highs. With that also being said, that doesn't necessarily mean I necessarily want to short at all-time highs. There's a few different things to look at. Now, I will say the news on Oklo as of today is there was a $400 million offering, so that's going to dilute shareholders right now roughly around 4%, right? They're roughly a $10 billion company, so about 4% of their market cap is going to get diluted with a $400 million offering. This is good and bad for different reasons. One, if you're a current stockholder, you're going to get diluted. That's never a good thing. But the good side of things is that they have $400 million, depending on where they're selling it, of equity or of cash coming into their company, which is great because now they have money on their balance sheet. They could do more things with that. They can have more growth. Similar to when we get to GameStop, we'll talk about it. When GameStop had its meme craze and there was shares sold, or AMC had its meme craze and they did an offering to raise more money. This is how companies can take advantage of the stock market to increase and make their bottom line better. So with that being said, I don't hate that that was done as someone who has no interest, at least right now in the stock. I'm not long, I'm not short. But as someone who's watching on the sideline, anytime we see an offering, that is going to cause near-term volatility, but that also gives you the opportunity as someone who may not be in the stock to potentially consider an entry, because now you have to think of it from the point of view that the company has a stronger financial balance sheet, right? Their balance sheet in general, if they raise a bunch of money, it's better than it was yesterday. You just aren't invested yet, so it's a good thing, right? Now you get shares on a discount, theoretically, if shares drop, which they will, and you could have better financial performance in the future as a result of that. Now, with that being said, this is a $10 billion company, so it's not necessarily small, but it's not huge in terms of all the other companies we look at. So there's some volatility to be expected in general. What I'm looking for here, specifically on Oklo, again, I'm not necessarily short, or I shouldn't say not necessarily. I'm not short this name. I'm not long this name. And I personally, wouldn't day trade this name, mainly due to the fact that their IV and HV is pretty high. Your historical volatility is at 137, and your implied volatility, and this is your rolling 52 weeks, is 121. Your IV percentile, though, is not bad. So if you are someone who does buy the open options, 50% is pretty solid. And your HV is a little high. So that's basically indicating that a lot of volatility obviously is in this name, as you can see on the chart right now. But options volatility isn't as high as it could be or has been in the last rolling 52 weeks. So that's not horrible either. But what I'm looking at with this name here is waiting for some level of a pullback if I do establish a long or even a short position. Where to look essentially are these two levels here at 59.14 and 57.50, where there could be an area of support there on a back test. So getting down, losing about $10 here, that would be the area to consider along if other technicals line up with that. With that being said, there is a gap here that hasn't been filled just yet, from 40.43 to 43.63 on the daily chart. So you want to really watch that, because if this level cracks and there's some volume behind it, getting a pull to fill this level really wouldn't be shocking. You're talking about a 30% fall from basically where we are right now. So there is some inherent risk with being long this name at these levels, and I just find better levels to take better risk to reward, which would be in this range if I wanted to get long, or even in this range on the gap fill, or taking the short off of a failure of this range, depending on how the chart looks at that time. Again, this is my personal opinion, mainly due to the fact that I don't like too long companies that are at 52-week highs. I don't like to buy into the craze like that. If you got in early, God bless, but getting in now could be a little risky. It's not for me. And that's what we got for you today on OKLO. Next is going to be Tempus. So this is one submitted by one of our viewers live today on the Adam Cash angle. And if you don't watch, you should watch. It's up on my YouTube if you missed it. So there's recorded episodes as well. If you want to go ahead and check that out, we do some live trading, live market analysis, etc. But here's Tempus. So this is a healthcare AI company. Mainly got a lot of its, I want to say, juice from when Nancy Pelosi mentioned that she was long the name. And this is the weekly chart. Since then, very, very volatile. This is the weekly chart. Very volatile in general. This necessarily isn't a bad thing. It's just something to keep in the back of your head if you do decide to trade this name. Now, with that being said, it's a $12 billion company. So similar to OKLO, not super big, not super small. And if you are someone who likes AI, which most of us are looking at that as the bastion of the future, and healthcare, which is a massive, massive moneymaker if you can get some right things behind you, this could be a very interesting name long term. With that being said, I'd more than likely want to enter down here around this 50-14 area if I am to take a long. On the daily chart, you do have your 200 MA and your 50 MA down there as well, so there's decent support there where your risk to reward could line up pretty nicely. And you even have the second support down here, albeit $8 lower, but at 42.24. So if you're someone who's looking to build out a long position in equity specifically, these would be the areas I'd keep an eye on. Now, with that being said, if you are someone who's looking for a more short-term trade, I would keep an eye on breaking the high here at this 71.97 area, this localized high, where we rejected yesterday and closed underneath. And we might even break it today. Getting above that area with some volume could show some continued upside move here, specifically on TEM, and I'd look for around 83.60, so decent upside chance here if you're someone who's trading short-term options. Now, be, again, very aware that this is a volatile name with a lot of news going on right now, and a lot of people have their opinions on it, and anything Nancy Pelosi touches is instantly turns to gold. So what there is a risk for a lot of these names that we're talking about here is an offering. I would do a deeper dive. In full transparency, I've not done a deeper dive into TEM. I know it, again, from a technical basis. I'm interested in the name, but I haven't done a deeper dive into this name specifically. But if you are going to invest, I would do a deeper dive into their financials. Understand that it is some level of a growth company, but see how much cash they have and how much cash they will have until they run out of runway, whatever that runway may be. Be mindful if they're doing any sort of trials or anything like that, any R&D. These are things that could take more money, and R&D could actually balloon specifically with an AI company. So if there is a rush on the stock, if the stock goes up, you could fall victim to an offering. And a name like this, it's very volatile. That offering could have the bottom fall out on you pretty quick depending on how much the offering is for, which is a great transition into our next name, GameStop, which did an offering, and oh wow, GameStop is all the way down at 23 bucks, down 19% on the day. Look, I'll talk about a few things here with GameStop. GameStop is sitting on a treasure trove of cash right now. Massive cash, right? 8 billion, I think, something like that. And what was the offering? It's in here somewhere. I know there was an offering. 1.75 billion in convertible debt. Why does GameStop need another billion, $2 billion almost to survive? I have many different opinions on GameStop, and if you're one of these guys who are thinking the shorts haven't closed, etc., listen, the time for that was back here, or here, or here. These are monthly candles. The time for that was the first squeeze, or the second squeeze, or the third squeeze, or the fourth squeeze, or the fifth, or the sixth. The price has moved up rapidly at many different times. Or this one too, this most recent squeeze in 2024, right? The price has moved up many different times, and if you were short, and I know there's a whole drama there with failure to delivers and everything, if you were short and you're still short from 2021, you'd be absolutely demolished on your margin by now, especially with how the stock is not traded under like $10 or whatever, even after offering or having all these offerings. So I would have a strong sit-down conversation with yourself if you are someone who's long GameStop for the inevitable MOAS, and be honest, that isn't going to happen, or you already missed it. Now, with that being said, is there opportunity for GameStop? I think there actually is a lot of opportunity, but with very key words. They are sitting on a treasure trove of money right now. What are they doing with the money? They bought some Bitcoin, But outside of that, they're not doing too much with the money. So as an investor, that's a sign of concern. However, they've got enough money to really revolutionize their own company, to change it into something completely different. They've got a $10 billion market cap and almost as much money as they do in market cap, which is incredible. They could change their entire business. They could rename it something else and be something else. What I don't want to do is be early to that party, unless I'm taking a stab like today, where at least their market cap and their cash is roughly the same. I don't want to be early to that party because who knows what those plans may be. Those plans could be awful and I don't agree with them. I'd rather be late to that party where they do something new and exciting, and maybe they change the whole company, they change the name, they change everything, and they do something completely different because they have the money to do that. That's when I'd be interested. But until then, I would be very, very careful on GameStop. I would, again, down here isn't a bad idea to long. North of like 2208 isn't horrible. You've got a little block of support there. But I would be realistic with your expectations, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here with GameStop. I think if you are, I don't want to use the word delusional, but let me put it like this. Roaring Kitty unfollowed Ryan Cohen, okay? If the guy who started this all has some level of lost faith in the original like hype behind GameStop, something to consider. I'm just saying, don't hate me in the comments. It's just, you should at least make the consideration. That's all. And you don't want to trade with emotion. You want to trade rationally with good risk parameters, and I think that's what you should consider. And again, if you aren't long, there could be actually a decent long stab here, anywhere north of 2208 in like today's price. You might get a dead cat bounce, or if you're patient, that could just work out in general. It's just, do you believe in management? Do you believe in what they could be working on in the future? I also would not invest in GameStop as a Bitcoin proxy. Just invest in Bitcoin if that's the exposure you want. Okay, moving on to our next name on the heat check. That's going to be Boeing. Now, Boeing had an Air India crash this morning, which obviously affected their stock. Not great. We've seen Boeing trend up pretty like decently ever since, what was this, the tariff news? Yeah, so tariffs came through, and since then, right to the upside, pretty solid. Getting to this block of support here. Today, gapping down and underneath the localized POC here, so that's your point of control at 205.31. So if you are a bull, you're going to want to see Boeing close over that number today. If we do close over that number today, especially on this volume here, that could be a good sign that the bulls aren't really giving up on Boeing. And this was really like a liquidity sweep. You're respecting this localized level here around this 199.77. So you could even establish a long here with like a 199 stop and still feel pretty good about Boeing, at least in my opinion. Anytime we see these kinds of news, so obviously this crash is super unfortunate. It's horrible. A bit of a overreaction, at least in my opinion, on the stock price. There could be an investigation that could lead to Boeing having faulty parts or something, which caused it to malfunction, etc. Any of that could happen, which could be the downside risk here on Boeing. But if you like the name, and if you like and you want exposure to aviation, there's a decent upside move here if we continue past this weekly candle, basically the high of this weekly candle here. So considering a long north of 199, like I said, as a stop, it's not a bad stab here on Boeing. This is going to allow you to cool down. If that 199 breaks, it wouldn't shock me to get to like 195. So even if you want to move that stop down a little bit more, get a little leg room. Leg room, plane, get it? Have a little leg room there. That is a qualified risk you could take. But I wouldn't be too worried about Boeing, at least at this stage, as long as you're qualifying that risk with how you're structuring the trade. I think Boeing is actually decent here. Even as it has had this rally. This is allowing the ability for it to cool, retest this area of support where it recently was, or at least consolidation is the word I meant to say, and kind of use that as support to get back up here. So could be an opportunity here on Boeing. And the last name for the heat check today is Reddit. Now, most of you probably know what Reddit is, and if you don't, it's a social media platform. I hate Reddit. And I hate Reddit for two reasons. One, I don't think they have a great platform. Two, I don't think they have anything proprietary. And what I mean by proprietary is the information they collect, I think, is absolutely useless. Here's why. And I'm just bearish on Reddit. I'll say it straight up. I'm not short right now by any means. And looking at the chart, you could actually have a good technical trade here, which I'll talk about momentarily. But Reddit, outside of selling ads on social media, which, all the other social medias do, the data that they collect is pointless when people are just making burner accounts to rant about their husband, their wives anonymously, or look at porn, whatever thing they're doing on Reddit. There's not, in my opinion, really marketable information there. There is to some degree, of course. Obviously, the subreddits you follow and whatnot, you could target ads that way to hit a certain community or person. There's value there. But when people don't need to be who they really are, I guess I want to say, and some people are on Reddit, but on X and on YouTube and on Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat, all the other social medias, people are who they say they are. Obviously, there's people who pretend they're not and catfish and whatever. But a lot of the times, those people are who they say they are. They portray who they are. I'm Adam Cash, whatever. And yeah, you could do that on Reddit as well. But for the use of what Reddit is, in my opinion, I feel most people aren't portraying who they are because they're going to there as some place where they can be a little bit more anonymous than they already may be on social media in general. Now, with that being said, my own little bear thoughts out of the way, and I could be completely wrong on that. That's just my opinion. We'll see as time goes on. You're sitting around the point of control here on the daily. Not bad. Actually, let me check one more thing here. Did we have any news recently? Chief product officer to leave the company. That's not good. Anytime you have a C-suite change, normally pretty bad. Downgrade here. Fraud investigation. No idea what that is. You might want to check that out. Okay, so nothing like major here in terms of a catalyst. Just a hot name in general. You're at, we zoomed all the way out here. We are at this strong POC here from October 2024. 113.49. Actually, let's get a little tighter here. Let's go like that. That. Okay, so now 112.39. So if you like Reddit, staying north of this level, this is going to be a massive level to watch on the daily here. From a structural standpoint, so just looking at the technical here, you're basically you've had a rally, you've had your little moonshot, we fell down, you left a gap here as well. And now you're kind of consolidating here around the 200 MA. Being north of this, what level that was, 212.39, would be what I would consider good risk, where you could establish a long, if you like the name, and use 110 as a stop, just giving you a little bit of flux there. Or the 50 MA just shy underneath, that's roughly around 108. It gives you a little bit of wiggle room where you could still take advantage of the upside. Now, speaking just from a price action point of view, you could get 100% upside on this. So you could revisit the highs. This would be something where I would wait for, we already have the base. If the base plays out, you're looking at this area of consolidation as your first price target. So somewhere in this 160, 170 area is pretty solid before getting to highs. If we see basically a big old cup here, which could happen. I don't hate that idea. And even on the weekly, you have your MACD starting to flip here. Again, kind of forming that kind of, do a quick and dirty right now. Not measuring these perfectly, don't sue me. Kind of like a ascending triangle flat top breakout kind of thing. This is actually one of my favorite formations where we see price action move up, but there's still that ceiling. And if you're watching live, we talked about how as that resistance hits over and over and over, that ceiling gets weaker and weaker and weaker, eventually breaks. So now that we're seeing this on the weekly, I actually really don't hate this setup from a technical standpoint. So even though I don't love the company, how Reddit's sitting here, I think you could actually have a decent long if you manage a stop on this name. And again, I'd manage that stop at if you want to be a little bit more loose with it, around 108. Now there is good risk to reward here. Talking about $50 upside. If you risk 108, what's that? $6 downside. Pretty decent risk to reward if you like that name. So I don't hate Reddit as a long. It's not going to be an easy long to break, but when it does break, I think you'll have more of a volatile move. With that said, going back to what I said in the beginning here, I don't like Reddit as a company, and I think that is a risk. If you are an investor, you obviously want to like the companies you invest in, depending on what your goals are. So be mindful of that as you consider Reddit. All right, guys, that's it for the heat check. I hope you enjoyed this segment. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to see more.